Well, hey, fancy seeing you here. Surprise, surprise, we're talking data, we're talking statistics, we're talking SPSS. This is kind of a part two. This is kind of a standalone. And the last one, just to sort of get people caught up to speed where we are here, we went and used this syntax file in order to open up our General Social Survey Russia Federation 1992 data set. And so this time what we're going to do is we're going to keep pushing forward and get into the looking at our data file. And so we have been sort of visually scanning the data as we've opened it up several times, flipping back and forth between the data view tab and the variable view tab, expanding the variable label column so you can sit through here and read up on this stuff. We got the value labels here. And this is all well and good in terms of, again, being able to look at the data and see what's there. The problem we run into here is the fact that unless you've got a very, very unique mind, for the most part, simply sitting here and scrolling through this data set isn't going to provide you with any sort of summary, takeaway, message, any sort of information really from this data file, especially if you think about the fact that this 5 and this 3 and this 6 and this 8 and this 1 may mean very different things than what this 4 means compared to this 4 and this 7. We don't know these things. And so we need to start to look at our data and unpack it a bit more. And so for this little demo, we are going to start out by doing some point and click action, and then we're again going to incorporate our syntax file. So first thing we want to do to look at this data file is to run some frequency distributions. And so to do that with an SPSS, you want to go to Analyze, Descriptive Statistics, Frequencies. Again, Analyze, Descriptive Statistics, Frequencies. And so when I click on frequencies, I get a new pop-up. And here in my pop-up, I see all of the variables I have in my data file. Now, when you do this, you may end up seeing something that looks a little bit different than this. And if that's the case, what might be happening is that rather than having the variable labels, the variable names displayed, you are having the default of variable labels displayed. Because this is my SPSS with work, I have already set it up so that it is showing me what I want to see, which is the names, not the labels. If you are seeing this and what you are seeing is the variable labels, you can change that over to variable names by right-clicking and then just simply selecting this top option of display variable names. So we're going to go ahead and select these first three variables, V1, V2, and V3. We looked at these in class, but let's go and refresh our memories about what it is that we are looking at here. Again, to get those over here, I did that very quickly without really talking through it. There are a couple of ways. One, I can highlight, I can just simply select one, double click it, it moves it over. This process works if there's just a few that I'm interested in getting, but if I have a bunch of variables I'm interested in trying to pull at one time, that's not necessarily a successful strategy. And so there are ways of selecting more than one variable at a time. If I have all of my variables in order, I can simply select my first variable, go down to my last variable, press the shift button on the keyboard, and then select that last variable, and SPSS will fill in all of the values between. Maybe I don't want all of the variables in between, I just want a handful of them. Then I can press the control button, the CTRL button on my keyboard, and then I would just want to go and click on the variables I'm interested in pulling. If I accidentally click a variable that I didn't want, oops, I don't want 5.4, I can click it again and that will remove it from my selection. Once I've selected the variables that I'm interested in, I would simply need to press the arrow over and they will move those variables over here into the right-hand box. For this example, again, I want to go ahead and use variables 1, 2, and 3, or V1, 2, 3. And since those are in order, I'm just going to go ahead and have that first one selected, hold down the shift button, and then click that other one, and that's going to select all three of them, and I'm moving them over. And so from here, I can go ahead and press OK, and SPSS is going to run my frequencies for me, and then it's going to produce my outputs over here. Based upon the processing speed of your computer, this may go extremely fast. It may go a little bit slower. This data file is not that big, so it should not take that long for it to compute frequencies. But again, different machines are going to run at different rates. And so I can look at my variables here, and we can see we got our values of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 9, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 9. So again, we've got different values popping up. They each have the same each have the same value label, but what you'll notice here is that this variable, it would seem, had a couple people who said refused, whereas neither of these other two variables had that. One of the things that you'll also take note of is that values 1 through 5 seem to have a legitimate meaning. In other words, they were asked the question, how often do you watch news on TV? And they responded either never, under once a week, a few times a week, or every day. Values 7, 8, and 9 have different value labels that don't necessarily convey a very useful piece of information. So for number 7, a value of 7 means don't know, a value of 8 again is refused, and a value of 9 is missing. These can typically, so it's going to vary from data set to data set, but in this situation, I'm going to go ahead and say that we have 3 values 7, 8, and 9, that are essentially missing data. But SPSS doesn't know that. SPSS shouldn't know that because we haven't told it that yet. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to go ahead and recode these variables to both handle the missing data that appears there, and then we're also going to collapse some of these categories while we're at it, just as another example. And so for the first piece of this process, what I want to do is I want to try to get rid of the missing data. And so through our point and click feature to do the recoding, we can start up here with the data. Not data. We want to go to transform, recode into different variables. Again, that is transform, recode into different variables, and now I have a pop-up. The variables I want to recode both V1, V2, and V3, so I'm going to do the same process for selecting them as I did to select them for the initial frequency, and then I'm going to move them over here into this box. Now I need to go through and I need to define what I want to do to each of these variables. So I'm going to select the first one, V1, first, and now I'm going to select the old and new values button here. And why I'm selecting that is because I want to specify what the old value was and what I want the new value to be. Here there are several options for going through and specifying old and new values. You could specify values one by one. Again, here we have our variables have those values of 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So I could go, and I want those to stay the same. Those are valid responses. So I could go through here and I could say 1 should equal 1, and then add that. I can say 2 should equal 2, and add that. 3 should equal 3, and add that. 4 should equal 4, and add that. 5 should equal 5, and add that. So I've added each of my values one by one. That's not the most efficient process though, and so I'm going to go and remove these really quick and reset it essentially. Because my values are in a row, I can do a range instead of specifying each variable value, and I can just say a range of value of 1 through 5. I would like to keep them all the same, so I want to copy the old value. And then I would just press add, and what I've got now is 1 through 5. I should copy that. And so I now want to specify values 7, 8, and 9 to missing. So I can go ahead and keep the range because, again, I have these values in order. So I can put a 7 into this box, a 9 into this box, and then I want to set them all to missing. And so I'm selecting the system missing bullet over here. I am adding that. And then I can press, and now I have my 2 codes down here. I can press continue. I want to come up with my new name, and my new name I'm just going to call it VA Recode, or V1 Recode. And then I'm just going to call the label, I'm going to say V1 Recoded, and then I'm going to press change. And then I'm going to go through, I'm going to do the same thing for V2, where I get this as V2 Recode, change, and then this is going to become v3 recode change. And then I'm going to press OK to make this recode happen, or press paste to get the syntax.